Imagine watching a horror movie that's already designed to scare you, but it's told in a way that makes it seem real. The whole point of the movie is to make it look like it's a real thing that really happened and could maybe happen to you. That's what found footage horror is all about. It's a genre of horror where the whole movie is told through old VHS tapes or through a camera recording where it looks like it's a real thing. It's not supposed to be a movie, it's supposed to be real recordings that were just discovered after the fact. And that's what makes it really, really scary. This type of horror is awesome, it's scary, and I love horror movies, so I found an iceberg that goes over a lot of found footage horror movies, and I wanted to explain that iceberg for you guys. Let's do this. Now please subscribe to the channel, it actually helps the channel out a whole lot, you know, makes me really happy, so please. Also follow my Instagram while you're in the description, join my Discord, we can talk, chat, you know, I post some pretty cool shit on Instagram, and yeah, let's get straight into this. Let's kick off layer 1 with Cloverfield. You know, the movie that took the found footage horror genre and added a giant monster to it because we already didn't have enough reasons to avoid New York City at all costs. This film had everybody talking back in 2008 because it was one of those movies that had a marketing campaign that was honestly more memorable than the actual movie was. Remember the trailer? The head of the Statue of Liberty rolling down the street? Yeah, that was some pretty intense stuff. Too bad they couldn't keep that momentum rolling through the actual movie though. Right off the bat, Cloverfield throws you into this chaotic first-person nightmare with shaky cam footage that makes you feel like you're on a roller coaster with a bad case of vertigo. Seriously, if you didn't already have motion sickness before watching this, you definitely did after. And let's talk about the characters. Or wait, can we even call them characters? Or are they just a bunch of 20-somethings whose only purpose is to hold the camera and scream, "Oh my god," every 5 seconds? They might as well have been named Guy 1, Girl 2, and Other Guy because their backstories are about as deep as a kiddie pool. But hey, we're not here for character development, right? We're here for the big monster. The big, bad, New York stomping, skyscraper leveling creature that we barely get to see for more than a few seconds at a time. And when we do get a glimpse, it's like they took Godzilla, put it through a blender, and hit mutate on it. But sure, let's pretend that the point of this whole shaky, nausea-inducing mess is to keep the monster mysterious. It's not like they just didn't have the budget to show it off for more than a second, right? And then there's the ending. So after dragging us through a whirlwind of screaming, running, and dropping the camera every other minute, what do they give us? A final shot of the two leads hiding under a bridge, confessing to their love or whatever while the military decides it's time to nuke the city. And boom, cut to black. The end. Thanks for the ride, everybody. No explanations, no resolutions, just you're on your own type of finish. Did the monster survive? Who knows? Did they survive? Who cares? Did the characters finish? They didn't show enough of that scene under the bridge for us to find out. I mean, I get it, you're trying to be edgy and like open-ended and stuff, but come on, at least give us something. Give me a little bit of movie here. After an hour and a half of headache-inducing shaky cam and screaming, you could have given me a little bit of closure, right? But it's whatever, I mean, whatever. But hey, it's not all bad. Like at least they did something new with the whole monster movie genre, and they gave us some pretty cool scenes to look at while we're holding our popcorn. So props to Cloverfield for trying something new, even if it left me with more of a headache than a good experience. Next up on the iceberg is the Blair Witch Project. Now, don't worry guys, we're gonna get to some actual interesting unknown ones later on, but we gotta get through these well-known ones first. Or you can just go to the chapters at the bottom and skip to the next layer. But don't do that! Don't do that, because that means I get less ad money, and I need ad money to keep making these videos. So don't do that unless you want to, because that's kind of the whole point of YouTube, is that you can, you know, it's free content, so it doesn't really matter, but anyways. The Blair Witch Project, the movie that made everyone think twice about going camping in the woods and gave birth to the found footage genre that we all know and sometimes tolerate. Released in 1999, this little indie film came out of nowhere and became a massive hit, mostly because half the people watching it thought it was actually real. I mean, they put actual missing posters of the cast up in like public. That's insane. They really had everyone believing that some students actually went into a forest, found a witch, and then never came back. Brilliant marketing or cruel prank, or both. It's probably both, actually. So what's the plot? 3 film students head out to the Black Hills Forest in Maryland to shoot a documentary about the local legend of the Blair Witch. You've got Heather, the leader with a camera and a map, Josh, who has a meltdown halfway through, and Mike, the sound guy who, you guessed it, freaks out. They start by interviewing the locals about the Blair Witch who supposedly haunts the woods, and they venture deeper into the forest. Things get creepy. They get lost, hear spooky noises at night, find piles of rocks and creepy stick figures hanging from trees, and they argue about who lost the map. Hint, it's not the witch. The movie is basically a slow descent into madness as the trio realize that they're hopelessly lost and they're being stalked by a literal witch. It's all about what you don't see, and that's what makes the Blair Witch Project really shine. Because of their low budget, they knew how to make people actually scared, and that's by making the whole horror about what you can't see. There's no monster popping out, there's no jump scares, it's just psychological horror. It's the fear of the unknown that gets under your skin. You keep expecting something to leap out from behind the camera to scare you or something, but it never does. Instead, you just get ominous sounds, footsteps, and the feeling that something's gonna jump out at any second. And then there's the ending. After days of being lost in the woods and Josh mysteriously disappearing, Heather and Mike stumble upon an abandoned house. They hear Josh screaming from inside, and naturally, they go in, because why wouldn't you go into a random abandoned house in the middle of the night? They wander through the dark, finding weird symbols and handprints on the walls, and then it happens. Mike goes into the basement, drops the camera, and we see him standing in the corner, just staring at the wall. Heather freaks out, her camera hits the ground, and boom, cut to black. Roll credits. That's it. No Blair Witch reveal, no explanation, just a gut punch ending that honestly leaves you with more questions than answers. But that's really the genius of the Blair Witch Project. It doesn't need to show you the witch because your imagination probably already conjured up something scarier than this low budget had to offer. It's a masterclass in low-budget horror showing that sometimes less really is more. The movie went on to make a lot of money and it spawned a whole new wave of found footage films, but none quite captured this raw, true low-budget feel. And also, let's be honest, it made a lot of filmmakers feel like they could just grab a camcorder, go into the woods, and shoot some random shit and it'd be a good movie, but it's not that easy. Next up, we have Paranormal Activity. This is a movie that single-handedly convinced every white family ever that their house is haunted if they are missing their keys. Released in 2007, this movie is like the ultimate "what was that noise" movie. It took the found footage genre, gave it a supernatural twist, and then used it to scare the fucking living shit out of anybody with a budget so small that it probably costs less than your last trip to the grocery store to buy Marlboro Reds. So what's the deal with this movie? So it's shot like a home video project gone horribly wrong. We follow a couple, Katie and Micah, who have just moved into a new house. Life's good, right? Except Katie mentioned she's been haunted by something since childhood. Yeah, maybe lead with that next time when you marry somebody. Anyways, Micah decides the best way to deal with this is to set up a camera in their bedroom and record what happens while they sleep. Because of course that's gonna end well. As the nights go by, weird things start happening. At first, it's just small stuff, doors creaking, lights flickering, things that make you go, did I leave that open? But then it escalates. The bedroom door moves on its own, there's creepy whispering, and at one point Katie just stands next to the bed for hours watching Micah sleep. If that isn't a fucking red flag, I don't know what is, dude. I mean, some of my exes did some pretty toxic shit, but goddamn, bro. But hey, they just keep filming because apparently recording the demon being a demon is more important than trying to get rid of the demon or moving out? I don't fucking know. Anyways, that's just a nitpick. The film is actually kind of genius, I think. It lies in its simplicity. It doesn't rely on fancy special effects or elaborate scares. It's all about the tension, the build-up, and the terrifying idea that something sinister is happening right where you live. You never actually see the demon, but you feel its presence. It's like the worst game of peekaboo ever. And let's not forget the ending. After nights of escalating terror, Katie is finally possessed, and well, let's just say things don't end well for Micah. The movie closes with a final shocking jump scare that makes you question every shadow in your own bedroom. What makes Paranormal Activity really interesting is how it uses the found footage to really make this feel real. Like, this movie feels actually real. It feels like you're really watching just somebody's home videos, which makes the supernatural elements even more interesting and intriguing. The movie doesn't hand you the answers on a silver platter, it leaves you in the dark, both figuratively and literally, just like the characters, so you know just as much as the characters do, and that really makes it intriguing to want to learn more. And let's be real, after watching this, who didn't get the urge to put a camera in their own room to watch them sleep? I mean, I already put that in my basement where my wife lives. I'm just kidding, I don't have a wife. Women don't talk to me. Alright, what we do in the shadows is next. This one's gonna lighten the mood a little bit. Now, I'm not talking about the TV show. There's a 2014 movie that came first, but the show is fantastic. Go watch the show if you haven't. It's on Hulu. I think it's really fucking good. Okay, but the movie, What We Do in the Shadows, is what the show was based on. But for those of you who don't know what it is, I'll explain it. It's a 2014 film that isn't your typical horror flick. It takes the mockumentary style and turns that into a horror thing. Imagine a reality TV show like a mockumentary sitcom, but instead of bored office workers, you have century-old vampires. It's ridiculous, but it's fucking hilarious. Okay, so the movie follows 4 vampire roommates, Viago, Vladislav, Deacon, and Peter, living in a flat in Wellington, New Zealand. They're just trying to deal with everyday problems like splitting household chores, getting into nightclubs, and figuring out who's gonna clean up the blood after a messy dinner. It's a perfect blend of horror and comedy, poking fun at vampire tropes while still delivering a few spooky moments. But despite it being a comedy, the film doesn't shy too far away from its horror roots. There are some creepy scenes, like when they encounter a pack of werewolf, or when Peter, the ancient vampire, goes on a feeding spree. But most of the time it's all about the absurdity of their situation, like not being able to see themselves in mirrors or struggling with technology that wasn't around when they first were born. This movie's more about laughs than scares, but it still deserves a spot in this Iceberg because it is kind of scary, I guess, but it's just great. Next we have Wreck and its American remake, Quarantine. If you've ever wanted to know what would happen if a zombie outbreak occurred inside a claustrophobic apartment building, then this movie is for you. Wreck came out in 2007 and it doesn't waste any time getting into the chaos. It follows a news reporter and her cameraman as they shadow a group of firefighters on a routine call, only to find themselves trapped in a building with a fast-spreading infection. The whole thing is shot in a found footage style, making you feel like you're right there in the middle of the panic. The genius of Wreck falls in its simplicity. It starts with a seemingly normal night, then quickly spirals into a full-blown nightmare as residents turn into bloodthirsty monsters. The characters are quite literally locked inside with nowhere to run, and the handheld camera work makes every corner, every shadow, a potential threat. It's not just about the gore and jump scares, although there is plenty of that, but it's more about the suffocating sense of dread that builds as you realize there's no way out. Quarantine, the 2008 American remake, follows pretty much the exact same plot with a few key changes here and there, but basically it still captures that raw, visceral horror. It keeps the same found footage style, so you still get all the shaky cam and the dark hallways, and some fans argue that Wreck is a superior version because it's the original, but both deliver a pretty nerve-wracking experience, so take your pick. Now let's talk about The Visit, M. Night Shyamalan's 2015 attempt to make grandparents even scarier. The plot is straightforward. 2 siblings, Becca and Tyler, are sent to spend a week with their estranged grandparents whom they've never met. This sounds innocent enough, right? Except of course things start getting weird pretty quickly. The movie is presented in a found footage style, of course, with the kids documenting their visit as part of a film project. At first, the grandma and grandpa seem like your typical elderly folks with a few quirky habits, but as the days go by, those quirks turn into full-blown nightmare fuel. Grandma starts crawling around the house at night, scratching walls, and chasing them under the porch like a horror movie monster. And Grandpa, he's busy hiding diapers in the shed and acting generally creepy. What's interesting about The Visit is how it takes everyday situations and twists them into something sinister. The kids are told not to leave their room after 9:30, which is usually when things go from 0 to get me the fuck out of here pretty quick. There's this constant tension as the kids start to realize that something is seriously wrong with their grandparents, but they can't quite put their finger on it. And neither can you until the big twist. So the big twist of this movie, because of course there has to be one because it's M. Night Shyamalan, is that these aren't their real grandparents. They're just 2 escaped mental patients who have taken their place, and this flips the whole story on its head. It's a classic Shyamalan move, turning a slow burn thriller into a full-blown horror showdown in the last act. The Visit might not be the scariest movie out there, because it's more of a thriller, really, but I really like its found footage approach to this. It's a movie that didn't need to be found footage, but I think that it actually adds to it. And plus, this movie will make you think twice about visiting your grandparents next time. Next up, we have the Unfriended series. Now here's a series that takes found footage to a whole new level by putting it on a computer screen. In 2014, Unfriended came out and decided to use the world of social media and video calls to bring the horror right into the digital age. It's like a cautionary tale about the dangers of cyberbullying, but with a supernatural twist. The entire movie plays out in real time, with the screen switching between Skype calls, Facebook messages, and YouTube videos. It's the ultimate what the fuck is happening to my computer nightmare. This movie feels like I got a fucking sketchy email that I shouldn't have opened. So the plot kicks off with a group of high school friends chatting online. Just your typical teen stuff, until an anonymous user named Billy227 joins the call. This isn't your average internet troll though, like me. Turns out it's the vengeful spirit of their classmate Laura Barnes, who left life a year ago, earlier after an embarrassing video of her went viral. You get what I'm saying, right? And now she's back for some digital revenge. One by one, the friends start getting picked off in increasingly brutal and inventive ways, all orchestrated through their webcams. What makes Unfriended so interesting is how it uses the familiar interfaces of social media to make a horror movie. You're not just watching the characters react, you're looking at their chats, you're watching them Google things that it would make sense for them to Google in the moment, and it adds some realism to it. It's an immersive experience that really puts you in the seat of the characters. And also it plays on a lot of the fears of modern technology, like how the digital world can turn against you in an instant. Like who hasn't freaked out a little bit when the screen turns off when it shouldn't have, or when your webcam turns on when it shouldn't have. The scares in Unfriended come from a mix of psychological tension and supernatural horror. You never see the ghost in a traditional sense. It's more about how it manipulates the technology to torment its victims. From forcing them to play twisted games to making their darkest secrets public, it's a relentless assault that leaves you feeling just as trapped as the characters. The sequel, Unfriended Dark Web, takes things in a different direction by focusing on the dark corners of the internet and the dangers lurking there. It's a bit more grounded, trading the supernatural elements for a story about hackers and the black market, but it keeps that same sense of dread and inevitability. I like Unfriended. I mean, it's not the best movie ever made, but I like the idea of it. It's got a nice premise, you know, and after watching it, you probably are going to double check your computer's privacy settings. I know I did. Okay, next up we have a good one. This is the VHS series. So if you're into horror anthologies with a twist, the VHS series is probably right up your alley. It's disturbing and it's nightmarish. So kicking off in 2012, the series sets itself apart by presenting its tales through a collection of found footage tapes, each story more twisted and more bizarre than the last. The overarching premise of these movies is a group of criminals breaks into a house to steal a rare VHS tape, only to find stacks of tapes documenting gruesome and terrifying events. Naturally, they decide to watch them because, well, why not? Each tape in the series brings a different style of horror, ranging from supernatural encounters and body horror to psychological torment. What's so great about the VHS series is how it gives different directors the freedom to explore their darkest ideas. So each VHS tape has its own director. In one story, you might find yourself watching a couple's vacation turn into a demonic possession nightmare, and in the next, you're in the middle of a cult's ritualistic chaos. There's a certain rawness to these shorts that make them feel like you're watching something you're not supposed to see, almost like you've stumbled upon a collection of snuff films with a supernatural twist. The found footage style is used really creatively throughout the series. It plays with different formats ranging from hidden cameras and Skype calls to first-person perspectives using GoPro cameras. This approach adds to the unsettling vibe, making each story feel real and immediate, as if you're peering directly into someone's horrific final moments. The chaotic, grainy quality of the VHS tapes also adds to the atmosphere, making everything feel dirty and unpolished, which is perfect for the kind of gritty horror that these films aim to deliver. What makes VHS really stand out is its willingness to take risks and kind of step out of the box. The stories are really unpredictable and they're actually pretty disturbing and terrifying. Like, these are pretty great. It's not afraid to get weird either, which is a lot of the appeal. You never know when you're gonna get a new tape either, and that kind of keeps you on edge. It's a series that doesn't just show horror, it assaults you with it, bombarding you with imagery and ideas that stick in your head a lot longer than after the movie turns off. And while some segments are stronger than others because it's an anthology after all, overall, it's a really creative twist to the horror genre, and it's great. It's pretty great. Like, you've seen some of the clips of the weird shit happening throughout this Hopefully my editor will remember to put that in, editor. But yeah, I mean, it's fun to look at. It's just fun to look at. All right, and that was layer 1. Let's get into layer 2 now, starting with Creep. Creep is one of those horror movies that sneaks up on you. Released in Creep stands out. I mean, I thought Creep was pretty popular. Like, before I made this video, Creep was like pretty much one of the only movies in here that I actually ever heard of. So why it's on layer 2, I don't really know. But yeah, let's get into the next one. Next up, we have The Taking of Deborah Logan. The Taking of Deborah Logan is one of those horror movies that creeps up on you slowly, under the guise of something pretty mundane. Released in 2014, it starts off as a documentary about Alzheimer's disease, focusing on Deborah Logan, an elderly woman who's suffering from that illness. And it's about her daughter, Sarah, who's struggling to take care of her. So the film crew is there to capture the daily life of a person with Alzheimer's, but as they start filming, they quickly realize that there's something much more sinister at play here. At first, it seems like Deborah's behavior is simply a result of her illness. She wanders around the house, has episodes of confusion, and exhibits some disturbing behavior. Things that could be explained away by her condition, but soon, things start to get weird. Deborah begins to speak in tongues, her body contorts in unnatural ways, and she exhibits a strength that's far beyond what you'd expect from a frail elderly woman. The documentary quickly turns into a terrifying descent as the crew realizes they're not just dealing with Alzheimer's, but with something paranormal and malevolent. The genius of The Taking of Deborah Logan lies in how it blends the real-life horrors of a debilitating disease with supernatural horror. The found footage style makes everything feel intimate and real, pulling you into the family's nightmare as they watch Deborah become something unrecognizable. And then there's the iconic, jaw-dropping scene, pun intended. If you've seen it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's the kind of imagery that sticks with you, making it clear that this isn't just another possession movie. This film manages to keep you on edge with its slow-building tension, balancing the fear of losing a loved one with the terror of losing them to something far worse. Edge. Next up, we have Afflicted. If you're into horror with a bit of an action twist, Afflicted is one that you shouldn't miss. Released in 2013, this film takes a found footage concept and injects it with a dose of adrenaline. The plot revolves around two best friends, Derek and Cliff, who decide to go on a world tour documenting their adventures for an online travel show. Things take a dark turn when Derek has a one-night stand in Paris, only to wake up the next day with strange symptoms that turn out to be the early stages of vampirism. What starts as a travel vlog quickly becomes a harrowing documentation of Derek's transformation. The movie does an excellent job of balancing the horror elements with action, using the found footage style to give an up-close and personal view of Derek's newfound abilities and the terrifying consequences that come with them. As he gains superhuman strength and agility, the film uses creative camera work to showcase some intense scenes and brutal encounters. It's not just about the horror of becoming a monster, but also about the horror of losing yourself in the process. Afflicted also stands out for its impressive use of practical effects and its commitment to grounding the supernatural elements in a realistic setting. Derek's transformation is depicted in a visceral, unsettling manner. His skin burns in the sunlight, he vomits blood, and his body starts to betray him in horrifying ways. It's a slow descent into darkness, with Derek and Cliff desperately trying to figure out what's happening and how to stop it before it's too late. Alright, next up we have House LLC. House LLC is like a how-to guide on why you should never, ever open a haunted house attraction in an actual haunted house. Released in 2015, this found footage film centers on a group of entrepreneurs who decide it's a brilliant idea to set up their Halloween haunt in an abandoned hotel with a dark past. Because nothing screams good idea like setting up shop in a place where people died mysteriously. The film starts with a bang, literally, by showing us footage of the opening night where things go horribly wrong. Patrons are screaming, chaos ensues, and the footage cuts off right as everything goes dark. Then it rewinds to show us how we got there, following the crew as they set up the attraction. Now you'd think they'd do a little bit of research on the hotel before they would put up shop in there, but no, they just brush off the place's creepy history like it's nothing. Like they don't fucking care. As the days go by, strange things start happening. Mannequins seem to move on their own, creepy noises echo through the halls, and in true horror movie fashion, no one thinks to pack up and leave. Because who cares about a few ghostly figures appearing at the end of dark hallways when you've got a profit margin that you've got to upkeep? The crew keeps chalking up all the weirdness to stress or pranks, even as things get more and more terrifying. You're left screaming at the screen, just get out of there, but of course they don't listen. The buildup is slow and methodical, creating a tense atmosphere as the crew's documentary-style footage captures increasingly bizarre and horrifying events. And let's not forget the ending. It ties back to that disastrous opening night in a way that makes you rethink everything you just watched. House LLC is a pretty solid entry into the found footage horror genre with a mix of scares that are both psychological and supernatural. It's proof that sometimes the scariest place you walk into with a camera in hand is the one you go into willingly. Next up we have The Sacrament. The Sacrament is like one of those true crime documentaries that you really wish wasn't actually based on true events, because surprise, this movie is based on true events. Next up we have The Tunnel, which is a movie that makes you question every tunnel, sewer, and underground passage you've ever seen. Released in 2011, this Australian found footage movie starts with an already unsettling premise. A journalist and her crew decide to investigate a series of mysterious events happening in abandoned tunnels under Sydney, because nothing screams good idea like exploring the dark, dank, rat-infested labyrinths under a city, right? The story kicks off with Natasha, a journalist who's been looking into a government cover-up about homeless people disappearing into these tunnels. Naturally, she convinces her camera crew to go down there with her and see what's really going on. They're expecting to find a conspiracy or some evidence of shady government dealings, but what they actually find is, well, let's just say is not family-friendly. As they venture deeper into the tunnels, the claustrophobic atmosphere starts to get to you. It's dark, it's cramped, and the crew's only source of light comes from their camera equipment, which makes for some seriously eerie shots. And then, of course, things start to go wrong. They hear noises, see shadows, and the deeper they go, the more it becomes clear that they're not alone down there. The genius of the tunnel is how it uses this environment to create tension. The tunnels themselves are like a character in the film. They're oppressive, they're endless, and they're full of unseen horrors. And one of the best parts is that you never really get a good full look at what's actually haunting them. You see glimpses, you see shadows, you hear weird noises, but it's mostly left to your imagination. And sometimes not knowing what's out there is far more terrifying than knowing what's out there. And by the end, you're left with a movie that doesn't have a big budget or flashy effects, but it still makes something genuinely scary. All you need is a camera, a creepy setting, and a pretty good story to make something scary. Next up we have The Den, which is pretty much every internet user's worst nightmare. Released in 2013, the movie takes a found footage concept and gives it a modern twist by setting everything on a computer screen. It's like Unfriended, but way more unsettling and with a heavy dose of paranoia and anxiety. If you've ever thought about what would happen if somebody ever got control of your webcam, this movie might make you want to put a little piece of tape over it. The plot revolves around Elizabeth, a graduate student who's conducting a research project on the habits of people who use social media called The Den. It's basically a mix of Skype and chat roulette, where you can video chat with strangers from around the world. Elizabeth starts off innocently enough, chatting with random people and documenting their interactions for her project, but then she stumbles upon a mysterious video chat with a masked stranger who shows her some seriously disturbing content, and before she knows it, her life starts to spiral out of control. Her computer is hacked, her personal information is exposed, and she's being stalked by someone or something who is watching her every move. The film escalates as Elizabeth tries to figure out who's behind it all, only to realize that she's been pulled into a dark web of voyeurism, murder, and cybercrime. What makes The Den so effective is how it plays on the fears of so many people in this modern age of cybersecurity and that kind of thing. The entire film, like Unfriended, is shown right in Elizabeth's screen. That's the entire movie, so it really puts you there with her, going through all the things that she's going through. And then the tension builds to a terrifying climax that leaves you questioning every webcam, every email, every social media account you've ever used. It's a cautionary tale about the dangers of oversharing online, blah blah blah, all this shit that your parents taught you. But it's a little bit sure. Just don't be dumb. That's the end of layer 2, guys. Whoop whoop. Whoop whoop. Let's get into layer 3. Whoop whoop. I'm so hyped for layer 3, guys. So if you're hyped too, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. And leave a comment about what your favorite part of the video is so far. Is it the movies? Or is it the Among Us gif that I put right there for these 5 seconds?
Greetings, my name is Beef, and
Okay, so the first one in layer 3 is the Pyy Tapes. I've talked about these in other videos before, and people always fucking make fun of my pronunciation of it, but I don't know, is it Poughkeepsie? Poughkeepsie. The Poughkeepsie Tapes, yeah. The Poughkeepsie Tapes is one of those movies that's like a dare. People tell you about it and you think, how bad can it be? But then you watch it and you realize that it was fucking worse than you could have imagined. Released in 2007, this film is presented as a mockumentary about a serial killer who documented his crimes on hundreds of VHS tapes, which the police discover in an abandoned house in Poughkeepsie, New York. What follows is a deep dive into some of the most disturbing and fucked up shit ever put to screen. The film blends interviews, police footage, and clips from the killer's own tapes to paint a portrait of a man who is as sadistic as he is elusive. And let me tell you, these tapes are no joke. They feature everything from home invasions and kidnappings to torturous games of cat and mouse with his victims. It's like Saw meets America's Most Wanted, but without the comfort of knowing that justice will be served by the end. What's truly unsettling about the Poughkeepsie Tapes is how real it feels. The grainy, low-quality footage gives it an authenticity that makes you question if you're watching something you shouldn't be seeing. The killer remains a faceless, nameless entity throughout, which only adds to the horror. You never get a sense of who he is or why he's doing this. He's just this shadowy figure who revels in the suffering of others. It's like he's making these tapes for his own twisted enjoyment, and you're just an unwilling participant in this sick game. The movie doesn't offer any easy answers or solutions either. It leaves you with a lingering sense of dread and just the knowledge that weird people like this can just be anywhere. Like they found these tapes in just some random house, like it leaves you with this dread that could be like down the fucking road from you. The Poughkeepsie Tapes isn't for everyone. It's disturbing, it's graphic, and it will definitely leave you feeling like you need a shower and a hug. But if you're looking for a film that gets under your skin pretty well, this movie does the job. Megan is Missing. This movie is really famous. I don't know why it's in layer 3, but anyways. Megan is Missing is one of those films that everyone warns you about, but you still really can't be fully prepared for what you're about to see. And guys, I've changed my opinion on this. I think I said in one of my videos, I forget exactly, it was like a long time ago, but I keep getting comments still on my phone today. They're like, you don't like Megan is Missing? You thought it was boring? You thought Megan is Missing is boring? No, not anymore. Okay, I changed my opinion for this video. Released in 2011, this movie is infamous for its disturbing content and uncomfortably realistic portrayal of dangers on the internet. The plot centers around two teenage friends, Megan and Amy, who live normal lives full of school, parties, and of course social media. But things take a dark turn when Megan starts chatting with a guy she meets online. Spoiler alert, he's not who he says he is. The film was presented in a found footage style using webcam videos, chat logs, and news footage to tell the story. It starts off innocently enough with typical teenage drama and banter, but it quickly descends into something much darker. Megan goes missing, and what follows is a harrowing look at the consequences of online predators and the terrifying reality of what can happen when you trust the wrong person. This movie doesn't pull any punches when it comes to showing the brutal aftermath, and it's not for the faint of heart. But here's the thing about Megan is Missing, and this is, I'm pretty sure why I said I didn't really like it in the other video. It's not exactly a good movie in the traditional sense. The acting is rough, the dialogue is a bit cringy at times, and it has a pretty low budget feel to it. But none of that really matters for what it's trying to do, because the movie's impact comes from its raw, unfiltered portrayal of a real world nightmare. It doesn't try to sugarcoat anything, and that's what makes it disturbing. The final 20 minutes of the movie are especially harrowing, and they've gained a reputation for being almost impossible to watch. It's a grim reminder that sometimes the scariest things in life are the ones that are actually real. Next up, we have Willow Creek. Willow Creek is a movie that takes the legendary story of Bigfoot and serves it with a bit of a Blair Witch kind of vibe. Directed by comedian Bobcat Goldthwait, apparently, yeah, and released in 2013, the movie goes for a minimalist approach to horror, relying on suspense and tension rather than special effects and jump scares. It's about a couple, Jim and Kelly, who venture into the woods of Willow Creek in search of the elusive Sasquatch. Because nothing says romantic getaway like trying to find a huge, giant, hairy cryptid that may or may not want to rip you to fucking shreds. The film starts with Jim, an avid Bigfoot enthusiast, dragging his skeptical girlfriend Kelly to the infamous location of the Patterson-Gimlin footage, hoping to capture their own evidence of Bigfoot. They interview locals, most of whom either laugh off the legend or warn them to stay far away, but of course they ignore the warnings because why not? What follows is a slow build of tension as they trek deeper into the forest, encountering eerie noises, unsettling signs, and that growing feeling that they're not alone. Willow Creek really tests your patience, honestly. It takes its time getting to the scares. But that's kind of part of the charm that it's going for. It's all about the slow burn, letting the anticipation build to almost unbearable levels. And then there's the infamous tent scene, which is literally just 18 minutes of Kelly and Jim just sitting in a tent, listening to exceedingly more unsettling noises. You'd think this would be kind of boring, which I guess it depends on who you are, but some people think that it's one of the most nerve-wracking scenes in found footage history. You're on the edge of your seat waiting for the next crack of a stick or the next growl to happen. See, this movie's whatever. Cool. Hey guys, I'm back. I went and took a shower, and I promise that's why my hair looks wet. I'm not just greasy. So the next movie on this iceberg is The Conspiracy, which is a perfect horror movie for anybody who's gone down a weird rabbit hole on the internet or something and thought, hey, what if that was actually true? So this movie follows two filmmakers, Jim and Aaron, who set out to make a documentary about conspiracy theories and the people who believe in them. What starts out as an innocent exploration of fringe ideas quickly turns into a full-blown nightmare as they realize that some conspiracies might be true. The film begins with the duo interviewing Terrence, a local conspiracy nut who believes that a secret society is controlling world events. They chalk it up to just another case of paranoia until Terrence mysteriously disappears. Naturally, they decide to dig deeper into his research, finding a complex web of symbols, events, and connections that point to a powerful, shadowy organization called the Tarsus Club. The deeper they go, the more they realize they're way in over their heads, but of course, they can't stop themselves from uncovering the truth. What makes a conspiracy so great is how it really blends fact with fiction. Like, it uses these real-world conspiracies to build a sense of realism around this fictional movie. And then, by the time that they actually infiltrate a Tarsus Club meeting, you're as freaked out as they are, and you're also wondering if they're gonna get out alive or not. The movie's a real slow burn like a lot of other found footage horror movies, but The Conspiracy does it pretty well. Next up we have As Above, So Below. As Above, So Below is basically what happens when you take an adventure movie, throw in some Dante's Inferno level horror, and set it all in the claustrophobic, pitch black labyrinth of the catacombs under Paris. Released in 2014, this film takes the found footage style underground, literally. It follows a group of explorers led by Scarlett, an alchemy scholar with an obsession for finding the legendary Philosopher's Stone. Because it's not enough to just be a regular archaeologist. No, she's gonna go full-on Indiana Jones with a death wish. The movie kicks off with Scarlett gathering her team, including her ex-boyfriend George, because of course we need some romantic tension, and a crew of urban explorers who know their way around the Paris catacombs. Their mission is to navigate the labyrinth tunnels in search of a hidden chamber where the Philosopher's Stone is supposedly buried. Seems simple enough, right? Just a fun little romp through some ancient abandoned tunnels filled with bones and... oh wait, this is a horror movie, so naturally, things go south very quickly. As they venture deeper into the catacombs, they start encountering all sorts of weird, increasingly terrifying phenomena. The tunnels seem to shift and change, they hear voices from the past, and they stumble upon some truly nightmarish sights that seem to be pulled straight from their deepest fears and regrets. It becomes clear that they've entered some kind of hellish supernatural realm where the rules of reality no longer apply. It's like the catacombs are testing them, dragging them through their own personal hells as they try to find a way out. In the end, you're left with a movie that's part descent into madness and part treasure hunt. It's a pretty unique blend of horror and adventure, and it's really actually interesting. I think that like labyrinth horror films are really fucking just cool, like liminal spaces. And maybe, just maybe, some things are better left undiscovered. So the next movie we have on this iceberg is Apartment 143. Apartment 143, or Emergo, is one of those films that takes the concept of a haunted house and shoves it into a tiny, cramped apartment. Because why be haunted in a mansion when you could be haunted in a studio apartment in New York that you're paying $3,000 a month for? Released in 2011, this found footage flick follows a team of parapsychologists who are called in to investigate strange occurrences in the home of a recently widowed father and his 2 kids. If you think being stuck in an apartment with your family is scary, just wait. The film starts with the team setting up all their fancy ghost hunting equipment in the apartment, which is already giving off some serious creepy vibes. The father, Alan, explains that ever since his wife left, weird things have been happening. Objects falling on their own, strange noises, the usual haunted house starter pack. But as they dig deeper, it becomes clear that there's more to this haunting than meets the eye. Apartment 143 doesn't waste much time getting to the spooky stuff. The film is full of poltergeist activity, creepy apparitions, and psychological mind games. The apartment itself seems to be alive, reacting to the presence of the investigators and pushing them to their limits. And then there's the daughter, Caitlin, who has a whole exorcist-style possession thing going on that makes you question if this haunting is supernatural or something much more personal and psychological. What makes Apartment 143 really stand out is how it blends psychological horror with paranormal horror, because they got all their high-tech shit showing like the ghosts and stuff, but a lot of it kind of points to maybe it's just the secrets of the family that's causing the horror. Kind of like a lot of Mike Flanagan's work, like The Haunting of Hill House, The Fall of the House of Usher. A lot of it comes as psychological horror and is paranormal, but it comes more from the characters than anything. That's a lot of that going on here. This movie doesn't tie everything up in a nice little bow either. It leaves you with a lot of questions and not as many answers, but that's okay for a movie like this. Next up, we have Lake Mungo. If you're in the mood for a slow burn horror that sticks with you long after the credits roll, Lake Mungo is a movie you need to see. Released in 2008, this Australian film is presented as a mockumentary, exploring the unsettling events following the tragic drowning of a little girl, Alice Palmer. But unlike most found footage films that go straight for the scares, Lake Mungo takes a different approach. It creeps under your skin with a sense of melancholy and dread, making you question what's real and what's imagined. It's kind of sad. So the plot starts with the Palmer family trying to cope with Alice's sudden death. They begin experiencing strange occurrences in their home, like eerie noises and glimpses of ghostly figures in the background of their photos and videos. Naturally, they think Alice might be trying to communicate with them, so they call in a psychic to help them understand what's going on. And then what follows is a series of revelations that slowly unravel the mystery surrounding Alice's death. The genius of Lake Mungo lies in its realism. It's structured like a true crime documentary, complete with interviews, grainy home videos, and news footage. This approach makes the story feel authentic, like you're watching an actual account of a haunting rather than just a horror movie about one. As the family digs deeper into Alice's past, they discover secrets and hidden footage that reveal that she was involved in something much more darker than they ever imagined. And this movie touches on themes of not just the supernatural being scary, but how it's kind of scary of not knowing someone truly who you thought you knew really well. And then there's the ending, which delivers a really bad gut punch. It's subtle, it's understated, and it's utterly chilling. It turns everything you thought you knew onto its head. Like Mongo isn't just about shock value or gore, it's about the slow creeping realization that sometimes the most scary things are the ones we can't explain. It's kind of an introspective movie. It's kind of sad and scary at the same time. Oh my god. Cannibal Holocaust. If there's ever a movie that's earned its fucked up, infamous reputation, it's this one. Released in 1980, this film is often called the most controversial movie ever made, and for good reason. Directed by Ruggero Deodato, Cannibal Holocaust was banned in multiple countries and even led to the director being arrested on obscenity charges because authorities believed that he had actually filmed real murders, which is, I don't know if it's hilarious or insane, or both. Spoiler alert, he didn't commit any real murders, but the film's realism is so convincing that it still sparks debate to this day. The plot is deceptively simple. A documentary crew ventures into the Amazon rainforest to film indigenous tribes, but they end up going missing. Months later, an anthropologist finds the crew's footage, which reveals the horrifying truth about what happened to them. What starts as an exploration of primitive culture quickly turns into a brutal tale of exploitation, violence, and the consequences of human cruelty. And I mean brutal. This film does not shy away from showing graphic, unflinching depictions of violence, including scenes that are so realistic, again, the authorities thought he actually killed people. Cannibal Holocaust is known for its shocking content, including scenes of sexual violence, animal cruelty, and gore that are almost too much to bear. I said it like that so the YouTube bot will pick up on what I just said. I hope you can still understand it. This is not the kind of movie you watch for entertainment, it's the kind of movie you watch to judge your own moral compass. The found footage aspect adds to its disturbing realism, making you feel like you're watching something that you really shouldn't be seeing at all. This film is often criticized for its exploitative nature, and rightly so. The director aimed to make a statement about the voyeuristic nature of media and its exploitation of real-life tragedy, but in doing so, he made a movie that a lot of people think is crossing the line itself. But what do you think? The next movie we have here is Grave Encounters. Grave Encounters is what happens when you turn a ghost hunting TV show into a full-on nightmare fuel. So released in 2011, this found footage film starts off as a parody of those ghost hunting reality shows that we all love to laugh at. You know, the ones where a bunch of self-proclaimed paranormal experts go into supposedly haunted places with night vision cameras and over-the-top reactions to every single creak or groan. Only this time, the ghosts are real and they're not here to just mess around. The setup is pretty straightforward here. So the crew of a ghost hunting TV show called Grave Encounters decides to spend the night in an abandoned mental hospital that has a history of supernatural occurrences. They lock themselves in, planning to film some spooky footage for their latest episode. And at first, it's all fun and games. They walk around in the dark, shout into the void, and pretend to be scared for the camera. But as the night goes on, things take a turn for the genuinely terrifying. Doors start slamming on their own, creepy apparitions appear, and the building itself seems to be twisting and trapping them inside. The crew quickly realizes they're in over their heads, but by then it's too late. The hospital's dark history comes to life, and the crew is left running for their lives as they're hunted by malevolent spirits. What makes Grave Encounters work is how it takes the cliches of ghost hunting shows and flips them on their head, turning the crew's skepticism and bravado into sheer terror. And then there's the ending, which really drives home the hopelessness of the situation. So you think that they might get out, but no. The hospital's not just haunted, it's alive and it's not letting anybody leave. The film's mix of jump scares, creepy atmosphere, and the escalating madness of the crew makes it a standout on this iceberg for me at least, so yeah, it's pretty cool. Next up we have Man Bites Dog. So if you're looking for a movie that blurs the lines between horror, satire, and outright discomfort, Man Bites Dog is the one. Released in 1992, this Belgian film takes the form of a black and white mockumentary following a film crew as they document the daily life of Ben, a charismatic and disturbingly casual serial killer. What starts as a simple documentary project quickly spirals out of control into a darkly comedic and horrifying journey as the crew gets more involved in Ben's violent escapades. The plot is as straightforward as it is unsettling. Ben goes about his day explaining his profession in a disturbingly matter-of-fact manner, dropping hints of twisted philosophy as he casually murders people. What's truly shocking is how the film's crew gradually becomes complicit in these murders. Like, at first they're just observers, but as the movie progresses, they start participating, helping him dispose of bodies and even taking part in some of the violence themselves. It's a chilling commentary on the nature of voyeurism, media desensitization, and how easily moral boundaries can be crossed. Next up we have Noroy The Curse. If there's a film that defines the phrase slow burn horror, Noroy The Curse is it. This 2005 Japanese found footage movie is an intricate, unsettling journey into the supernatural that leaves you feeling like you've witnessed something that you weren't supposed to see. It's like the horror equivalent of a jigsaw puzzle. There's pieces everywhere, and the more you start to put them together, the more you realize you're dealing with something much darker and more complex than you ever anticipated. The plot follows a paranormal investigator named Masafumi Kobayashi as he delves into a series of strange, seemingly unrelated events. There's a girl with psychic abilities, a ritualistic dance, strange noises in the night, and a mysterious woman who seems to be connected to it all. Kobayashi's investigation takes him across Japan as he uncovers an ancient curse linked to a demonic entity named Kagutaba. The film was presented as a documentary with Kobayashi's footage and interviews piecing together the story in a way that feels disturbingly real. What makes Noroy so effective is its methodical pacing and attention to detail. It doesn't rush to scare you, instead it builds an atmosphere of dread that grows with each new revelation. The scares are subtle and creepy, often hiding in the background or caught in fleeting glimpses on camera. There's a constant sense of unease, as if something terrible is lurking just out of sight, and the film uses that to keep you on edge throughout. And then there's the ending, which ties everything together in a way that leaves you with more questions than answers. It's like you've been pulled into a dark, twisted conspiracy that goes far beyond what you initially thought. Noroy The Curse is a masterclass in psychological horror, showing that sometimes the most terrifying things are the ones you can't fully understand. Alright guys, I'm back, and I am wearing different clothes because it is now tomorrow, because these videos take like forever to record. I'm sorry guys, okay? But I'm back and we have more found footage horror movies to talk about, okay? The next one is The Last Broadcast. Before the Blair Witch Project made found footage horror movies famous, there was The Last Broadcast. Released in 1998, this movie is one of the earliest first cases of the found footage style in movies. It revolves around a public access TV show called Fact or Fiction, where the host sets out to investigate the legend of the Jersey Devil in the Pine Barrens of New Jersey, and spoiler alert, things don't go that well. The setup is pretty simple. So the hosts, along with a psychic and a sound guy, venture into the woods to capture the Jersey Devil on camera. What makes this film interesting is that it's not just found footage, it's a documentary about what went wrong on their expedition. You see, everybody except for one crew member ends up dead, and the lone survivor is accused of all the murders. And then the movie is like the documentary going through the footage recovered to try to explain what really happened, so it's pretty interesting. As the footage unfolds, it becomes clear that something, or someone, is out there stalking them in the woods. The tension builds as the group becomes increasingly paranoid and the line between reality and legend starts to blur. Now, I'm gonna start cutting all my explanations of these movies pretty short now, because at this point, all I'm gonna do is talk about the plots, because most found footage movies are the same and like what I can say about them, you know, because all of them really try to like play with the combination of like what's real and what's not real. That's kind of the whole point of found footage. So I feel like I'm just repeating myself every time I say that about these movies, because I wrote that in the script, but now that I'm saying it out loud, I feel like I'm just repeating myself. So from now on, I'm gonna cut them a little bit shorter. Also because this video is like a million years long. Okay, and with that, we're on to layer 5, which is the last layer we're covering in this video. So the first movie in this layer is called August Underground. This is the kind of movie that makes you wonder if maybe you should have just stuck to Netflix originals. Released in 2001, this film is infamous for being one of the most extreme and controversial entries in the found footage style. It's not just a horror movie, it's a test of your endurance and sanity, pushing boundaries in a way that makes you feel like you need to wash your eyes and maybe everything else after you finish the movie. The film is presented as a homemade tape shot by a pair of killers who basically document their sprees of torture, murders, and depravity. There's no plot to speak of, there's no character development, no moral lesson, it's just an unfiltered look at how the director views sadistic serial killers. This is the kind of movie that like, that one really fucking annoying piece of shit in film school is like, oh, I like avant-garde filmmaking, this is that. But it sucks. It's not a movie, this is not a movie. This is just like someone found the most disturbing footage they could possibly make and then they released it as a movie. The camera is shaky, the footage is raw, and there's an unsettling sense of realism that makes you question whether or not what you're watching is staged or real. And I know I said I wouldn't repeat myself, but this movie really fucking does that. Like, this movie is, it looks real. This shit looks real. What makes August Underground so notorious is its refusal to provide any kind of explanation or context for anything that you're seeing. You're just thrown into the middle of a nightmare, forced to hold the camera while these killers do their depravity. There's no music or editing or really anything that makes it look like a movie. You're just watching a relentless barrage of graphic killing, and that's it. This film really isn't for everyone, and I don't think it should be. And if it seems like I'm cutting this one extra short, it's because there really is no plot to this movie. Like, I already explained it as best as I could. Next up, we have Guinea Pig Devil's Experiment. If you ever wondered what it would be like to watch a snuff film but without the pesky moral requirements of like, is this real? Then Guinea Pig Devil's Experiment is here to fill that very specific void. Released in 1985 as part of the Japanese Guinea Pig series, this film is infamous for its graphic violence and being deeply unsettling. This is a movie that's so realistic it sparked an investigation by the FBI, who thought they were dealing with an actual snuff film. So yeah, it's not exactly a fucking feel-good watch. The plot, if you can call it that, is disturbingly simple. A woman is kidnapped and subjected to a series of increasingly brutal tortures by a group of men. That's literally it. There's no story, no character development, just human torture, and that's it. The film was presented as a series of experiments on pain and endurance, with each segment supposed to like push the limits of what you think you can handle. The camera lingers on every single disturbing detail, like it refuses to look away as the woman is beaten, tortured, burned, and mutilated in ways that look too real to be a movie, like seriously. And what makes this movie like special to me is this like sheer audacity. Like it doesn't try to justify its existence, it doesn't say sorry for what it's doing, it's just doing whatever the fuck it wants without like feeling, morally justified. Or I should say without feeling like it needs to be justified, like it's just there, it just does whatever it wants. The effects are so convincing that you can almost understand why people thought it might be real. And for that line read, it probably just saw me reading it from my computer, because I doubt my editor can fucking put any scene from this movie in at all. Like, there's some behind the scenes, dude. Whenever the movie's showing on screen, I'm looking at my fucking screen, okay? Let's just move on. The next one is Guinea Pig 2, Flower of Flesh and Blood. That's a sick ass name, by the way. Flower of Flesh and Blood sounds cool as shit. Anyway, this is in the same series. It was released in 1985 too. It's notorious for its grotesque imagery, blah blah blah. Now guess what the plot of this one is. Can you guess, guys? So a man kidnaps a woman, drugs her, and proceeds to dismember her piece by piece in a ritualistic manner, all while reading a poetic monologue about the beauty of flesh and blood. This one also has no real plot or anything deeper than that, no development or anything, so I'm just gonna go past this one, because it's just the same thing, again, pretty much. And the difference is, I don't want to watch enough of either of these movies to really know the differences to tell you guys, okay? I don't think any of you want to know either. Basically, these movies are just like a purified version of body horror. Like, there's no they don't bore you with a fucking story. They're just like, yeah, you came here for body horror? Look at this. And look at this. Next up, we got Hate Crime. Hate Crime's plot is pretty straightforward and terrifying in its simplicity. A Jewish family is celebrating their son's birthday when 3 neo-Nazis break into their home and start terrorizing them. The entire movie is shot from the perspective of a handheld camera, capturing the chaos, brutality, and sheer terror of the situation. The attackers have a single-minded purpose: to torture and destroy this family in the most horrific ways possible. And the film doesn't shy away from showing you every excruciating detail. Hate Crime is not an easy watch at all. It goes straight for the jugular with its portrayal of raw, unfiltered violence and the complete helplessness of its victims. And with this one too, there's no soundtrack, there's no stylized cinematography, just a relentless, unflinching look at the horrors of a hate-fueled act. It's the kind of movie that makes you wonder, what the hell you're doing sitting here, watching a movie when this is the movie, and what the director had in mind, what the hell the director was trying to achieve. That's how I felt when I was watching The Boys Season 4. If you've seen the show, you know what scene I'm talking about. When Huey's in the basement. I remember I was sitting there watching and I was like this, and I was like, what am I doing with my life, bro? Next up, we have Savage Land. Savage Land is one of those movies that sneaks up on you with how clever and chilling it actually is. Released in 2015, it's a found footage film with a unique twist on the zombie genre, presented as a faux documentary. The movie uses a blend of photographs, interviews, and news footage to tell the story of a small border town massacre that leaves everybody dead, except for one man, a Mexican immigrant named Francisco Salazar. And let's just say people aren't that happy about him being the only survivor. The film's brilliance lies in how it blends horror with social commentary. As the story unfolds, you learn that the entire town of Sangre de Cristo, Arizona, was wiped out in a single night. The police arrest Francisco, accusing him of being responsible for the massacre, but when they develop the photographs from his camera, the true horror of what happened comes to light. The photos show a horde of terrifying zombie-like creatures attacking the town, which raises the question: was Francisco an innocent man trying to document the horrors he witnessed, or is this all part of some elaborate cover-up? Savage Land uses its mockumentary format really well, especially with just the photographs. The still images are particularly haunting because they force your imagination to fill in the gaps, making the horror feel a lot more personal and immediate. It's a slow burn kind of terror that creeps up on you, turning what could have been a standard zombie film into a pretty thought-provoking and well-done movie. What makes Savage Land stand out is its social commentary on things like immigration, racism, and the way that society reacts to tragedy. So it's not just about the zombie monsters, it's about the monsters that were inside us all along. The film is eerie and it's unsettling and it's black and white, and it's really good, yeah. Next up we have the Attakus Institute. This is the found footage style movie that's basically a love child of The Exorcist and Stranger Things, but then with a faux documentary twist. Released in 2015, this film dives into all sorts of things like conspiracy theories, government conspiracies, supernatural experiments, and a whole bunch of stuff, and it wraps it in a package that makes you feel like you're watching classified footage that you were never meant to see. It's the kind of movie that makes you wonder if somewhere out there in the middle of nowhere there actually is a secret lab doing this kind of stuff. And there probably is. The story centers around the titular Attakus Institute, a small research facility in the 1970s run by Dr. Henry West, who's been studying paranormal phenomena with a group of psychic test subjects. Things are weird but manageable until they bring in Judith Winstead, a woman with some seriously freaky abilities that make all her previous subjects look like amateur magicians. She's not just bending spoons and reading minds, she's doing stuff that has the scientists questioning the nature of reality itself. Naturally, this catches the attention of the US government, who decides to take over the lab and weaponize Judith's abilities, because when has that ever gone wrong in a horror movie? This film is also presented as a documentary with interviews and dramatic reenactments, which give it a sense of authenticity, which I think really works well in this movie's favor particularly. You get to see the decline of the Institute as Judith's powers grow and become more uncontrollable and terrifying. The scares are a mix of subtle and overt, from the eerie way that Judith just stares at people to the outright terrifying moments when she demonstrates just how powerful and dangerous she really is. By the time that the government realizes that they're in way over their heads, it's pretty much too late for them to do anything other than just sit back and watch. Next up, we have Be My Cat, a film for Anne. This is a masterclass in unsettling realism, brought to you by the guy who took the concept of a passion project way too far. Written by, directed by, and starring Adrian Tofay, the film is about an aspiring young filmmaker named Adrian, really, who's obsessed with Anne Hathaway, and by obsessed, I mean he's willing to kidnap, murder, and basically do whatever it takes to get her attention. Talk about dedication, right? I wish I had fans like that. I'm just kidding, guys. Don't kill anybody, please. So the plot is simple, but, horrifying. So Adrian decides to make a movie to convince Anne Hathaway to star in his next project. He hires 3 local actresses to film scenes that will supposedly showcase his directorial talents. But you might have guessed, his idea of directing involves more than just shouting action. He's more interested in putting these actresses through psychological and physical torment, all while maintaining a disturbingly calm and cheerful demeanor. It's like watching a behind-the-scenes documentary of a snuff film, with Adrian guiding you through every deranged thought he has. What makes Be My Cat, a film for Anne, so terrifying is Adrian Tofay's performance. He's so convincingly creepy that you start to believe that maybe he actually is a real psychopath at work. His fixation on Anne Hathaway and his delusional belief that she'll see his film and want to work with him adds kind of a layer of dark humor to this movie, too. It's funny in the I can't believe this is happening kind of way, but it also makes you feel a little bit dirty for laughing. And the found footage style makes this movie feel disturbingly intimate, which makes you kind of feel bad for even watching it. Next up, we have Sergei Prakov, also known as Descent into Darkness: My European Dream. Released in 2016, this documentary follows the story of a Russian filmmaker named Sergei Prakov who travels to France to shoot a documentary about the European dream. Sounds innocent enough, right? Well, it quickly becomes clear that Sergei isn't just any filmmaker, he's a deranged artist whose obsession with his vision leads him down into a descent of madness and violence. It's like the Blair Witch Project meets American Psycho, but with a heavy dose of what the hell's going on here, just for good measure. The film starts with Sergei arriving in Paris to shoot his documentary, but as he starts filming, his methods become increasingly erratic and dangerous. He alienates his crew, harasses strangers, and generally behaves like a man who's lost all sense of reality. It's like watching a train wreck in slow motion. You can't look away even when you know that you probably should. The found footage style gives the film an unsettling sense of authenticity, like all of these. As Sergei's behavior becomes more unhinged, the line between his documentary and reality kind of starts to blur. He becomes fixated on capturing the truth in the most extreme ways possible, and it becomes clear that his project is less about making a film and more about indulging his own psychotic impulses. The film takes you on a journey through his twisted mind, showcasing his increasingly disturbing actions with a darkly comedic edge. It's the kind of movie that makes you laugh one moment and then recoil in horror the next. Next up, we got Long Pigs. That's a sick ass name too. So if you ever wondered what it would be like to watch a documentary about a real life cannibal, Long Pigs is the answer to your question, except it's a mockumentary, not a documentary. Released in 2007, this film follows two filmmakers who decide it's a great idea to document the life of Anthony McAllister, a charming and disturbingly candid cannibal. Oh, and he's a serial killer, too. The film is shot as a documentary, with Anthony leading the filmmakers through his life and, of course, his hobby. He explains his methods, his motivations, and he even offers up cooking tips like he's auditioning for a weird episode of MasterChef. The filmmakers follow as he meets his victims, kills them, and then butchers their bodies in graphic detail. It's the kind of movie that makes you feel like you're watching something you really shouldn't be. What makes Long Pig so effective is how it presents Anthony as a likable, almost charismatic figure. He's the kind of guy you'd have a beer with if he wasn't also the kind of guy who would have you for dinner. The film explores the banality of evil, showing how someone can be both utterly normal and completely monstrous at the same time. It's darkly humorous in parts, with Anthony offering up dry, witty comments on his work that makes you laugh even as you're cringing at the gore. Alright, next up we got Mortal Remains. Mortal Remains is one of those films that takes the concept of a lost, cursed movie and runs with it in the creepiest way possible. Released in 2013, this mockumentary claims to tell the story of Carl Attakus, a mysterious and infamous filmmaker whose work was so horrifying that it was banned from public viewing. Think of it as the horror version of those found footage urban legends, but with a meta twist that makes you question how real it really is. The film starts with two filmmakers who set out to uncover the truth about Carl Attakus and his lost horror movie, Mortal Remains. According to the legend, Atticus's film was so disturbing that it drove people insane and even led to a riot during its one and only public screening in 1970. As the filmmakers dig deeper into the mystery, they learn that some things are better left in the past. Mortal Remains does a great job of building a sense of dread and suspense through its documentary style. It blends interviews, archival footage, and creepy reenactments to create a narrative that feels authentic and unsettling. The film plays with the idea of the cursed movie, tapping into the age-old fear that some art is so dark and twisted that it just can't be contained. As the filmmakers get closer to uncovering the truth, the line between reality and fiction blurs, obviously. And yeah, that's it for this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed this horror movie Iceberg. It's been a while since I made one of these, and I kind of missed it, so I'm probably going to be making some more horror movie Icebergs. Let me know in the comments what kind of subgenre you want me to cover next. I've done body horror, psychological horror, holiday horror, and now found footage horror. So yeah, let me know what you want to see next. Also, if you notice, I've only covered half of this iceberg in this video, but if this video reaches 100,000 views, I might cover the second half, but only at 100k views, so get this video to 100k views. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. Again, let me know what subgenre you want to see next, subscribe, all that, but you guys are the best. Thank you for watching this far into the video. Have a great day, have a great night, and sweet dreams. Mwah.